like to call the meeting to order. Thank you everyone for coming. And our first item will be approving the agenda. Any corrections or additions to that? You have a motion?
So move.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So moved. And next item is approval of the January 16th minutes.
Motion to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
And we have a question.
Yeah. Taylor, did you get my email about the word?
Yes, sir.
Okay, was that correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
All in favor? Approve?
Aye.
All right.
Any opposed? So moved. First item of business is conditional zoning for the shops on the Parkway. And we'll start it off with the staff report.
All right, thank you, Bill. This project is conditional zoning 2024-05. Although we're into February, this was applied for back in 2024. And it's conditional rezoning from general business to conditional zoning general business for the villages at Shops on the Parkway. Shops on the Parkway LLC is the applicant, and they're requesting this rezoning at 278 Shops on the Parkway Road. The applicant is requesting to redevelop the property from a single-level retail center to a mixed-use development with retail, restaurants, and residential units. The applicant is seeking approval of Phase 1 at this time only, which is an addition of 34 dwelling units. I had 33 in the staff report, but it's 34 dwelling units in a 3 to 4 story building on the south end of the property along the Middle Fork New River. The applicant is sharing the entire master plan with the community, and they've done that at the neighborhood meeting to indicate their future long-term expectations, but anything beyond Phase 1 will require additional approval and have to come back through this process. The applicant purchased Shops on the Parkway in 2022 and has determined the property is underutilized. The applicant proposes a community with residential, retail shops, restaurants, adequate parking, outdoor lawn and dining areas, all tied together within a walkable development with pedestrian connections to sidewalks and the future Middle Fork Greenway. Some of the proposed buildings on the site of the project build-out will exceed 35 feet in height, including Phase 1, the residential component on Phase 1. So an increased street setback of 40 feet and a 16-foot side and rear setback will be required. Although the current plans indicate a 20-foot street and an 8-foot side and rear setback, that's on one of the sheets. This project still meets the required setbacks of 40 and 16. As far as the building, I'm going to go a few slides here to get to that. The majority of the proposed residential building has a ridge of 37 feet. That's where you walk into this ridge here. And then the other part, there's 5 mezzanines across the face of this building, and that maximum height is 53 feet, and that's to the highest point of each one of those. And I think, did y'all get some plans shared with you? I think that is reflected there too. So the applicant is requesting an approval of this 3 additional feet for those parts that exceed 50 feet in those mezzanine areas. They're seeking that as an approval or a condition of approval of the project. The residential building has a combination of vertical wood siding with heavy timber beams and accents. There is substantial stucco and EIFS plan for the exterior walls. Staff has asked for a reduction in that type of siding material and requested wood lap siding, or we even talked about feather edge wood siding if appropriate. We talked with the architect back and forth a little bit over the past week, and so they've made a change to some of on the the view that you see up here and then what's been put before you, less stucco as a building material. They've made that change and reflected it. I think I put in there a brown metal standing seam. I believe it's a bronze. Is that something like a gray, charcoal gray look? And then natural rock for the columns and accents and the proposed chimneys. Since this is phase one only, staff is asking that if future phases don't happen, that the applicant be required to make some exterior upgrades to the existing retail shops that blend with and complement the proposed residential building. I've included two staff conditions for you at your place there, and the applicant is agreeable to these additional staff recommendations. And one of those would mention that in number one, and I'll go back to that in just a minute when I get to the final conditions. The current parking lot will be adjusted to accommodate the proposed residential building once the end of the retail building is removed. Parking for the residential building will be separated somewhat from the rest of the retail center with some trees and buffering. The applicant proposes, this is another condition, that there be one parking space for every one bedroom unit and two parking spaces for every 2 or 3+ bedroom units, plus one space for every 4 units in the residential building. So the one space for every 4 units is part of our code and that's required, but they're asking instead of the half space for 1 bedroom and another half space for a 2 or for a over 3 bedroom unit, that it just be two parking spaces for everything 2 or more bedrooms, excuse me. So that's a request that they've made. The proposed parking requires 74 spaces and the applicant is providing 77. Through this project, the applicant is proposed, there'll be less impervious areas than what there is now. And through phase one and the overall build out of the project, both would reduce the impervious areas that are on the site. The applicant is proposing rain gardens and bioswales to treat the stormwater and provide water quality benefits that are not currently on site before that water reaches the middle fort. Public water and sewer currently service the property, but the applicant needs to relocate some of the lines to accommodate this proposed building location. There'll be some new dumpster areas on site, and they will be screened within the redesigned parking lot between the proposed building and the retail building. With the removal of the south end units of the current retail building, the parking lot in front of the residential building will be reorganized, and there's some additional parking lot shade trees and a line of buffer trees to separate the residential building from the retail. There is a gap on the southern edge of the property between that and Chatola. Chatola has an area of maintenance that they have down between that and the dam for Chatola. And there's just a break in there that needs to be a buffer added on the Shops on the Parkway property to increase that buffer through there. And if you've seen it before, there's a little walkway through that. And it would not include necessarily that, but everything else through there needs to be increased with some additional screening. The stream side of the the building has a vegetated stream buffer that will remain and help to screen the proposed building from Highway 321. I mentioned the applicant's proposed conditions, one for the parking. The other is for the maximum building height to be no more than 53 feet measured from the primary entrance. They held a neighborhood meeting last week, and the applicant shared their immediate plans and then those proposed plans for the future. I'll read those staff recommendations for consideration. If within 2 years of the issuance of the final CO for the phase one condominium building, the applicant decides not to proceed with the future phases of the development, then exterior modifications shall be completed on the remaining shopping center buildings. The modifications shall include painting, roofing, siding treatments, rock treatments, timber beams and similar finishes that cause the shopping center buildings to blend in and or match the materials in Phase 1 condominium. If the modification work is required for failure to move forward with the future phases, the work shall be completed within 36 months of the final CO issuance for Phase 1. That's not 5 years, that's just 3 years total. So within the first 2 years, if they decide we're not moving forward, then the requirement is on them over the next year to make those upgrades. And then the second one, that a sidewalk be constructed along the access road to connect the proposed Phase 1 condominiums to the intersection of 321 and the future Middle Fork Greenway trailhead areas. That's on the future plans, but we think that it needs to be included in this part, so you have direct access out to that. Let me go through a site plan and be able to answer any questions you might have of me before the applicant makes a presentation. These were included, and I think they're in front of you as well right now, but this portion of the building will be removed to make room for this new building they're going to locate here. And then this parking will be reconfigured like this. And so access goes around the building for service and deliveries, and they will still be able to get through this path through here, through this parking lot area. This will be screened for the benefit of the tenant or those that are living in the condominium building. And the area I mentioned earlier was back in here, where it connects over to Chatola. There needs to be additional screening placed there. There's a blow up showing a little bit more detail here. And this shows the rest of the plans that they have in future phases. I think now if you have questions for me, it might be better if I just provide you answers that you need, and then the applicant would like to share some things with you.
What happens to that connection to Chatola?
I don't know. I don't know if anything right now.
Been any discussion between the two?
I think maybe, but I'll let them.
The town has an easement through there also, if I'm not mistaken.
Utility easement? Yeah.
And that would have to remain somewhat open to maintain that utility.
Yes.
What are town infrastructure plans for water, sewer, power to accommodate the additional units?
To accommodate these additional units, they'll just have some relocation that's required of existing lines. Nothing beyond that. Our current facilities can handle the amount of increase.
Kevin, you said 53 feet in height at the peak on the mezzanine. That's the highest point. Do you know what the highest point is on the existing retail at the peaks?
No.
Just so I could get a sense of how high
Yeah,
this is in relation to what's existing.
You're talking about the little corners that have the,
Yeah,
I could guess,
yes.
it's probably 37, 35, somewhere in there, just to the peak of those corner units.
Appreciate you forwarding the citizens email that you shared with us. Talking about limited resources got me thinking just a little bit as we continue to look at developments like this where we're adding capacity and limited resources in terms of the reservoir, clean water availability, and the ability of the waste management system to accommodate the additions of these as we grow. Do we have any numbers at all that might help us understand?
I think we're running about 40% on the sewer plant
Okay,
and more than adequate water.
so that's not a concern at all as we
No.
move forward with the additions of these.
No.
Okay.
Any other questions of Kevin?
Yeah, let me ask one more question. I think we all recognize that this is an underutilized piece of property and needs to be a village-style mixed use, but I was thinking that we were going to be approving a conceptual master plan, not necessarily a master site plan. Does our code not permit us to require a conceptual plan that just shows the total number of units and the total square footage of retail or restaurant?
Not at this time. They're not required to provide, because they may not do it. I think, if I understand the applicant correctly, that if successful, they have long-term plans, and they were under no obligation to share a future plan with us, but they did, and that's to give us an idea, this is what we'd like to do. But right now, they're just asking for the phase one approval, and it would stand on its own.
That was a point I just wanted to underscore, that even though we're referring to it as phase one or phase 1A,
Yeah,
we're just approving 34 units. And
that's right.
the site plan has absolutely, the master plan that they showed us was just their vision of what it might look like. And it has no legal significance, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
I do have a question on that too, based on the staff conditions and considerations. We are making a tie-in that they will, if they do not go forward with this, they will modify the existing property that they have, the retail shops and so forth. That is part of this condition, right?
Yes,
If we make that,
yes.
if we adopt that
if you
staff
agree to that, yes.
recommendation, and that would at least give us the security that we'll still have retail shops in the area when they go forward with the next phases, right?
No,
If they don't
it means
go
that they take the retail shops that they currently have and make them look like this building. And so the
Yeah, but there
materials.
won't be any condos or anything in there is what we're saying, if they do not go through
That's
with
correct.
phase two.
That's right.
And it stays a retail so that we still have a drugstore, we still have other local venue retail there. If
I
they
don't
can
think
lease
that
it.
you can dictate who's in there.
Right.
You can just say it's going to remain like it is, or, other retailers will come and go, but you cannot,
Okay, so let me re-clarify what I'm
Okay.
saying. Right now, that property is zoned. We're only asking for the conditional rezoning of that area by the condos, not the whole.
no, the whole thing. The whole property is under this conditional zoning.
Well,
CZ applies for the
that's
whole
my-
thing.
That's my point, that they can come in and take it from a retail, which it is right now in the zoning, and not build anything like this and put retail in all of those little shops down there. If we do the zoning like we're talking about now, where it's conditional. Am I correct on that, or am I off base?
No. It's going to remain retail or whatever tenants occupy the remainder of those units
Right.
until such time as they move forward with something else that you would have specific approval of.
Okay, and it would come back and
Yes.
something else.
Yeah, anything that's different from this phase one plan, this is a conceptual master plan, but they're not tied to this. They're tied to this.
It's tied to that, which includes the existing retail.
Yes.
Okay.
And that goes forward,
And
and it
that's-
rezones the entire property, including the place out on 321, not the gas station, but the Docks
Docks
Rocks.
Rocks, yeah.
Yeah, that's all encompassed into this master plan, which has just phase one at this time. That makes sense?
But if I could clarify, but there's nothing stopping them from coming back for approval for another condominium project.
Right. That's right.
That's phase two, or 3, 4, 5.
That's right.
But there wouldn't be any conditions then because they've already got the whole property, all the property now.
No, you can add conditions. When they come back for the next 2 phases at one time, or whatever they decide to do, the conditions that are governing this property with this rezoning, you can add others
Okay.
and keep those in place.
Each additional phase would be a modification of that permit.
That's right.
Of this permit.
Of this rezoning, yes.
Could we place a condition on this approval that requires that there always be an amount of retail commercial?
Right now,
Yeah, right now.
I don't know. I mean, I guess you can, they have to agree to it. They, as a conditional zoning, it's applicant proposed conditions. They've agreed to these 2. If you propose another type of condition, they don't have to agree to it. They could, but they don't have to. But then they're back to, do they have an approval? It's kind of a,
Well, there are 2 possibilities. One is that, well, there are 3 possibilities. One is that they do this project and then do nothing else.
That's
And
right.
I think that's what you've suggested here as a condition. They could also come back for approval for the second phase being more residential. Or they can do something close to what they showed in the master plan.
and a third option is they get it approved and do nothing. Just leave it like it is. But let's let the applicant address some of those a little bit more specifically.
Yeah. Kevin, my concern is that you always wish for the best, but if they get the first building done and decide not to go forward, then they have to make it, according to your condition number 1, everything in Shops on the Parkway has to look like that new building.
There has to be modification of the retail buildings that are left to have some compatibility with this new unit, this new condo. Because it's, what's out there is dated.
Sure.
And I think they're trying to bring it up to a better standard that fits Blowing Rock better than what we have now.
And would those modifications come through the planning board and the
Yes.
council?
Mhm.
When they get it, if they choose to just let it be retailed and go with it?
Well, not necessarily. If you're saying, if they don't do anything more than this condo building, that could be just a staff approval of some of the exterior modifications that they would make, unless you say it's got to come back to planning board and council. That's a condition that you could add. That you want to see if they're not going to move forward with anything more than this first phase, and you want to require them to come back for what they're going to do to the rest of the shops as far as materials and facades,
Well, they
you
would
can
have
do
to
that.
come back if they go to phase 2 anyway, but what you're saying is they may not have to come back. If they're just gonna do facade changes, they would go to the planning board staff, and as long as it met code, the staff could approve it.
Yes, that's how it would be otherwise.
Condition, unless we added an additional condition that makes it come back.
Unless you add it,
You could add that as a
again,
condition.
it's a safeguard. The whole point of that condition was a safeguard that we can have some upgrades to the rest of the commercial. I don't think that's what their intent is, but you never know what could happen.
Well, we're hoping their intent is to do the whole
Sure.
facility. That's,
I understand.
At this point, we'll hear from the applicant, make any presentation.
Hello, I'm Jay Harrell, Costco Companies.
Come up here, Jay.
I am.
Yeah, come on up here. We got, get it so we can get on there. And I'll run through this if you need.
I am not officially the applicant, GoPro Management is. Chris Barefoot was here for the neighborhood meeting that some of you guys are here for. Had an unexpected medical situation, so he wasn't able to come up today. So I'll try and answer all questions. But we have been hired by GoPro Management to help with development, construction, sales, property management. And a lot of these questions coming up, the reason that they chose to start with this area is it has the least impact on the current shopping center. Any of the other phases, we would have to tear down a whole lot more of the building to start with. And it is Oak Hill Management's, intent to do the entire development. During the neighborhood meeting, some people were wanting to know total unit counts. And then that's very difficult to decide right now because this building here of 34 units has 6 or 7 different variations of floor plans, starting from a 1-bedroom at about 1,000 square feet up to 3 bedrooms around 1,800 square feet. So we really need the market to be able to kind of tell us what the demand is for this project. So the answer to that last time was, if 1 bedroom they're selling really well, then, maybe a higher unit count with smaller square footage units. If it's the 3 bedrooms, it'll be a lower unit count, and larger units. The rest of our team is Mike True with Municipal Engineering and Bill Dixon and Kelly Coffey with Appalachian Architecture. And happy to answer any questions.
Anybody talk about price points?
We have run, a pro forma for this first building. Now, we are in development up here, and I've heard from our suppliers that with, unfortunately the hurricane damage here, the wildfires in California, and then potentially some tariff issues, we could see very wild fluctuations in building materials over the next, 2 years or so. So right now, though, we're hoping that prices would start in maybe the mid-5s, and then some of these top floor units that are larger would work into the low 1 millions.
So, understanding you're not, that you're representing the applicant.
Yes, sir.
Not them. Kevin said you were okay with the drafts as they are of the 2 additional staff conditions. Is that right?
Absolutely. I'm gonna have a really hard time selling those condos if they think they're gonna get stuck looking at the current things. So.
For sure. One other, so a question of a potential modification or addition to your first requested variance on the parking. So recall that it's the parking, basically, well, Kevin outlined it, but the reduction of
Yes, sir.
parking requirement. Would the applicant be okay with keeping it as it is, but adding to the end of it saying, provided that any future phases of redevelopment will need to address the parking supply and demand for the entire development, including phase 1. And I can say that again, and I will in a moment if you want me to, because you're frowning at me. But the question is, whether it's that precise language or something similar, when y'all come back for phase 2, when the applicant comes back for phase 2 or the whole master plan, would like to have some kind of a commitment that parking will be looked at for the entire, all the demand, all the spaces there for the entire development, and not excluding phase 1 from that discussion.
Correct. Yes, sir.
So the language, which may not be the right language, but the best that I could think of is say, this variance that you've requested, provided that any future phases of redevelopment will need to address the parking supply and demand of the entire development, including phase 1.
I believe that's very fair. That it's over my pay grade to make that decision, but yeah, I think that's fair.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
I assume these are condominiums, right?
Yes, sir.
And I don't know if this is a question for Kevin. Short-term rentals are not permitted in this area, Kevin?
They are.
They are. Could we put a condition, a restriction on short-term rentals? Maybe require, would you be amenable to a condition that restricts the number of times an owner can rent his unit in your condominium declaration? So that you don't
I
have-
think we would be opening to hearing some of that. However, with how limited short-term rentals are kind of in the area based on the zoning, and if there was to be a dip in the market or something, that does help sell a few units. With the last 2 developments that we've done, we had a 6-month minimum rental and a 30-day minimum rental, and it lost us a lot of sales. I think we'd be open to hearing suggestions, but again, that's above my pay grade to make that decision.
Well, I'd like to see some restriction on short-term rental, so that owners are not renting for weekends, in VRBO. We don't need any more VRBO units or Airbnb units. Would you be amenable to some restriction? You tell me what would be.
Potentially, you know, I do think that it's somewhat of a double-edged sword, because if we come in with all of the retail, I think those tenants would really, you know, would love to have the short-term rental opportunity there, as that would hopefully bring in a larger customer base for them.
Are you suggesting that these condos may actually be rented on a daily basis?
I don't think a daily basis. I mean, we have a vacation rental program. We manage about 150 units. We have strategic minimums throughout the year, but we have nothing less than a 2-night minimum for anywhere. But we have strategic minimums throughout the year, you know, so if you wanted to book for July right now, we have probably a 2-week minimum, and then as it gets closer, it does reduce. You know, unfortunately, I'm not in a position to make that decision for the applicant.
Have you guys done any studies, group studies or focus groups to know what the market is, right? Demand is for this right now here?
Not necessarily right in Blowing Rock. However, though, our company has developed about 150 condos in the last 4 or 5 years. You know, so we are. Then I think that's why we were chosen to be part of the team, is so that we could add, you know, valuable feedback as to what we are seeing. But again, that's why we have kind of a very wide range of product types in this building, so that we have a little bit of everything at various different price points. So it's not every single unit's, you know, over $1 million.
Kevin, with the builder, since we're going to be looking at the 1, 2, or 3 bedroom units, and we look at number of parking, the bedrooms determine the parking spaces, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so when we look at a 1 bedroom is 1,000 square feet, and a 3 bedroom is 1,800 square feet. If they were all 1 bedrooms, you would have, you know, less parking requirements, and the 3 bedroom would have 1/3 less than what would be required, is what we're saying. So if you built all 3 bedrooms out there in the same footprint, you're going to have you're going to need 1/3 more parking requirements per space. And how do we address that, Kevin?
They're meeting, based on what they've proposed as a ratio they'd like to use, they meet that criteria. Based on the number of 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, and 3 bedroom
Right.
units they have in the complex.
But they haven't committed to that. That's what they're presenting now. If they go with all 3 bedrooms,
No, they couldn't change that number unless they provided parking somewhere else on the site.
right?
What they're asking for is exactly what's in the plans.
Okay.
X number of
So
1
if they
bedrooms.
chose to build different ones that would require more parking, they have to come back. Okay.
They have to provide the parking.
I just want to make sure, because we know that 1,800 for 3 is different than 1 for 1,000, you know, so I took a little math in school, not much.
They're at, as I mentioned, it's on a 1 bedroom. They're asking for just 1 parking space, where our code requires an additional half.
Right.
Does
And
this
that's a
building,
total, it's cumulative, so you don't have to put a half space out there. It's when you put it all together. And in our code, if you get down and it requires 70 and a half spaces, it only requires 70. We don't round up. Everything else in this world you round up, but our parking code, you don't. So based on what they're proposing, they meet the parking standard based on what they would like to do. For a 2 bedroom, it's going to be 2 spaces, which meets the code.
Right.
For anything 3 or more, they're asking just to do 2 spaces for those.
And I believe there's only the 5 units on the top floor with the mezzanine are 3 bedroom. Everything else is 2s or 1s.
does this building propose an elevator?
Yes, sir.
It does?
Yes, sir. It's a centrally located elevator in the middle with an interior staircase, and then the 2 exterior staircases that I don't know if you saw both of them on the rendering that was put up there, but there are 2 exterior staircases on the end.
Those mezzanines, are those actually separate units, or are those a 2-story?
No, sir, 2 stories. So there's an
two-story.
interior staircase inside that unit up to a little loft area, another bedroom in the back.
You know, another question that comes up is, when you live downtown, parking is a challenge.
Yes,
And
sir.
when you live here and come downtown, parking is a challenge, and the warmer the weather, the more the challenge. I can see a situation where you're out there, you have a condo, you're parked in the parking lot, and you want to come downtown, and part of what's going to go through your mind is, where am I going to park? And so how we get folks, 34 units, how do we get 34 families from there downtown with no parking? Has there been any consideration about shuttles or any kind
So folks have brought that up. We've also looked into potentially some golf cart stuff. We've been in talks with Chatola, so that way we would be able to maybe potentially access through that area where there's already kind of a walkway through there. So we are looking into those kind of things. I mean, I think, for 34 units, I don't know if we financially could make it make sense to provide a shuttle, but if there was a way to potentially partner with other people on something like that, we'd be very open to it.
You mentioned golf carts. Another thing that's become popular in town is because if you have a golf cart, you use it because it's easier to park.
Yes, sir.
And they're like the units out by the country club. There are a number of folks that have golf carts, but there's no indoor place to park them or store them.
Yes, sir.
And so they put tarps over them in the summer, and then they store them in the winter. And it just seems like it would be something to consider if you had a place for people that wanted to have a golf cart, to store a golf cart, secure a golf cart, so that they could use their golf cart to come downtown.
Yes, sir, and we agree, and we kind of looked into some of that. The space is a little tight there, and we've built condos for 20 years in the area. We've always tried to figure out some sort of covered parking thing, and what we really run into is an issue in the wintertime of how do you clear the snow when you have a bunch of posts in the parking lot. So I think it's a great idea, and I do think we could explore it. But with as tight as it is with the number of parking spaces, and by the time you build something enclosed, you're eating into even more.
Where are the HVAC units going?
They'll be on the roof on the flat areas in between
Where,
the
it's like a
mezzanines.
parapet type
Yes,
situation?
exactly.
Perfect.
Yeah, like up in there. And those little- So that roof does not go over the
Oh, I
top.
see.
It's sloped and then has a place inside there.
Right, okay. Then do any of these units overlook the roof
Overlook the roof.
or overlook will they see the HVAC infrastructure?
No. All. I mean, there's windows on the front of the building. Obviously, the corner units will have exterior wall windows, and then everything else will be facing towards the roof.
So while this picture is up, Kevin had mentioned, I guess subsequent to the meeting last week, just the discussion about reducing the amount of stucco. Do these renderings reflect, and I heard Kevin say, I may have misheard, but that you had modified, the plans had been modified, at least conceptually, to reduce the amount of stucco. Is that what we're seeing here, or is there something else we're not seeing?
My name is Bill Dixon with Appalachian Architecture. Thank you all tonight. Yes, we took some of the comments in the neighborhood meeting to heart and reduced the amount of stucco. And this is what we're proposing now. Before now, we had more stucco throughout the building. Now we're going with more wood and less stucco. We're also darkening the color of the stucco some based on neighborhood comments. All the materials that we propose are approved now in the current ordinance in that zoning district. So stucco is approved. We propose to use real timber framing and real rock, not a pre-manufactured stone product. So it will all be authentic materials. I do like your stone accents. Have you given any thought to maybe adding a little more somewhere, either on the bottom or on one section, just to kind of break up the massing of the building? Well, we've had questions, could we reduce some of the stone? Really? And could we add stone now? I mean, I think as we develop the drawings more and get into from conceptual into schematic design development, we can consider that.
Thank you.
We have, I think, a flyby short video that will show you all the way around. Try to see how much of the building you could see coming down 321. The trees pretty much screen everything as you come down the hill towards the stoplight there. I think the video will show you that.
This one here. Here we go. There's a one on this one too.
I think it's only video, is that right?
Here's one. Here's another one.
Yeah.
Hang on.
Good point. I'll be happy to answer any other questions about the building itself. Mike True, the municipal engineer, the civil engineer is here and can answer any specific questions about the site. Mr. Dixon, before you step down, I'm having trouble seeing that on the catwalk, the railings, that's metal railings, is that with wire, horizontal wire? Or maybe a combination of both?
We would probably not do the wire from a maintenance standpoint. You know, one person rests their foot on it, and that's a 45-minute adjustment.
Good point. So what would you propose? Are you talking about just a fixed metal?
I think a metal.
Horizontal
Yeah.
or vertical?
Yes,
Horizontal?
with pickets. Code requires us to have pickets every 3.5 inches.
Or you would do vertical, not
Yeah,
horizontal?
not horizontal, no. That's a ladder for any kid or adult to climb on, always vertical.
That would actually be better.
Any other questions?
Again, thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Michael True with Municipal Engineering. We're the civil engineers for the job. I'm here to answer any questions that you may have about the site or utilities or the layout.
What's the ground makeup like?
The
Ground
ground.
makeup, is there bedrock? What are you hitting when you're,
We've had some preliminary borings because we were a little worried about the fill from talking to someone that was involved in that, the creation of the development. And we found that the fill is not too bad. And so the preliminary borings and what we found is not too bad. So we didn't hit any bedrock, but we did hit competent material.
What's the elevation between the river and the first floor?
It's at least 40 feet, I would say. It's down there pretty good if you've ever peered off into there. We do have, one of our sheets does have the topography on it. Yeah, it's a good 30, 35 feet down to the creek.
You know what the crest is?
With
What the river crest at?
The crest,
Yeah, what's its normal crest on height, river?
You know what, flood zone?
Yeah.
You see this at FW? That's the
Yeah.
map floodway, and in fact, that was at the time, it has actually gone down
Since then.
with the latest thing. We actually got the, Brian, we got that after Helene, didn't we? Revised flood zone was actually lower by a foot or so, the base flood elevation. But this is not in the floodway, can't be.
Yeah.
Okay.
And this isn't a watershed, but I noticed, I think I read somewhere there's a net reduction in impervious area.
There is, yes. I don't have the exact numbers, but we are reducing, we're creating more green space than there's now.
Is that just on this phase or the entire?
The
project?
entire project.
Okay.
Yeah, the goal is to kind of open it up and to have a community space in the middle of it, that everybody can use in a nice big green area, park if you will.
And the runoff containment system, you've got Boswell's and rain gardens.
Yes. Where this unit, where the first phase is going, we're building what is going with the current detention system. So we'll be required to replace that volume, that certain amount of detention. And right now, we're showing a potential rain garden there, which is environmentally a little bit better way to detain your water because it, all the plants that grow in there use the pollution, the nitrogen and phosphorus in the runoff as nutrients. And so you get better water quality out of systems like that. So we'd like to incorporate some of that in our detention system.
So that's preferable, say, than sheeting or something like that, where you spread the runoff out somewhere, allow it to just filter as it goes down to the creek.
Yeah, with the creek being down so low and so steep going down to it, we've got to be very, very careful about how we
Erosion.
discharge our water and will it erode.
Okay.
The rain gardens do promote infiltration back into the ground, so in that sense, they're environmentally good in many ways.
Thank you.
Appreciate y'all's time.
And at this time, we'll open it up for some public comment. It's not required, this is not a public hearing, but we typically like to do that to give town council a heads up on what they may experience at the public hearing. So if you'll come to the podium, tell us your name, where you live, and try to limit to a few minutes, and so we won't be here forever, but, and don't repeat other comments. We'd love to hear from you.
Somebody's got to go first. My name's John Calvert. I live on Hinkle Street with my wife, and that's my daughter. She lives on Goforth. And we also have a second home that we bought a few years ago to our motor home on Sunset. So I've been in the building development business my whole life, and the last 20 years I worked for the largest home builder, private home builder in the country. And done a lot of land development plans, a lot of presentations. And first of all, is there a principal here from the LLC?
No, he was unable to take the.
If I did that, I would be looking for a new job. They're asking you to approve something and nobody here can answer any of your questions. That is, it's rude is what it is. You know, I mean, he may have had a problem, but there's 5 other people there, and I know you got these folks who were part of the program, but anyway, so just for the record, if you look at the site plan, it does have a lot of buildings on there, and it's a preliminary site plan. It's going to go back through for approval. That's important, but this is their concept. So if you do the math, and it's hard to do because it's really small, and I had to get my magnifying glass out, but there's 200,000 square feet of residential mixed use on that plan. And we're talking about 33, but we're really talking about a master plan community on 17 acres on steps up Blowing Rock. So I think it's important to understand that what we're talking about today is not 33. It's talking about what the future looks like. And you know, he's a fine gentleman. He said there are 1,000 to 1,500 to 1,800. Just so let's say it's 1,500 square feet for a unit. That's in the 140, 150 homes. You know, of what we don't really know because they can't say if it's rental, short term, long term. Any rental's rental. So I think there's a lot of questions, and I think it's very important for Blowing Rock to understand what this project is. It's a big deal, and I think we need to have. We had this long conversation about the antenna on Green Hill, and we put a balloon up to talk about that. There's been a lot of conversation about that first building right there, how tall it really is, and what it looks like when you drive down 321, because that'll be there. If anything gets built, that'll be there. And so it's going to be there for all of us to see. So I think my comment is we should think what we're doing and just make sure that you could say that, hey, we plan it and we zone it for a conditional zoning, but right now it's general business. That's 0 residential. So they need us more than we need them. Just remember that. They don't have to do us a favor. They need us more than we need them. And so it's important for us to ask what we want, because without that, they got $13 million in the land, and they need to do something with it. So my guess is it's coming. So let's make sure we do a good job and we can all be proud of, what this looks like. Because you guys on the planning board, we also have the, city council, but in 10 years, it's going to be different people. And they may think different than you, and once that's proved conditional, it's a conditional zoning. Thank you.
And please direct your comments to the board. Anyone else?
I'm Jimmy Dixie. I live on Norwood Circle. I forget who I'm supposed to be speaking to here. I'm not here tonight to express my opinion about this project. I'm here to relay to you the voices of the residents and the Friends of Blowing Rock and surrounding areas who keep our community functioning and caring for one another year after year, sometimes generation after generation. Personally, I think it's counterproductive to differentiate between seasonal residents and locals or any other division that you might fabricate. I would sooner make the distinction between those who are invested in the quality of life and the character of Blowing Rock and those who are seeking to capitalize on the concentration of wealth we attract and the remarkable rise in property values. They care little about what is good for us as a community or what we need, because their main priority is profit. That's understandable. They might not even be here 2 years from now. I've given you there a sampling from the Blowing Rock Community Facebook page of over 346 comments, and actually that's higher now because I saw another post on there this afternoon that I haven't counted. To date, pertaining to the shops project, I've taken off all the authors' names, but 65% of the comments were in opposition to this project. About 18% were supportive, and the rest were neutral. I hope you'll read them when you have time. It's interesting read. Most of you probably know the community page. I know the commissioners and the town staff follow it. But if you don't, I'm sure that Emily would be happy to move you to the front of the approval line. She's got 2,000 people waiting to be vetted to get on the site. There are 3,600 plus members, and their voices are speaking loudly. We've entrusted you with our town, so we implore you, please, Planning Board, listen to what our community is saying, and make sure that your legacy is that you help Blowing Rock grow wisely and age with grace. Thanks. I appreciate you listening. Are there any?
Sarah Murphy. I'm a 20-year homeowner on Heritage Lane and also on the Board of Adjustments. My question is for the developers. Would you all do this if you couldn't do short-term rentals?
That's, all your comments need to be toward
Okay.
us. They're welcome to get back up.
So my question that you all can't answer, but that's my question for them, because I think their answer would speak volumes. My other question really is for the town. I wasn't able to come to the first meeting, and this may have been directed, but many cities either have a requirement and/or a tax advantage for developers to provide affordable housing for teachers, police officers, that kind of stuff in town. Do we have anything like that? Or that we could take into consideration for this project? Because I think that would make it that much more palatable as well.
Not currently, no.
Okay, those are my two comments for y'all to consider then.
Anyone else?
Hi, I'm Warren with Chatola Resort. Pleasure to be here today. First, a big thank you to Kevin for not just doing the normal notice, but how proactively he kind of notified us of a lot of things. As you all probably are well aware, we share a very large property line with this project. And as a result of that, I've spent probably more time than I would like to admit trying to get my arms around what's here, not just for us, but we kind of represent over 2,000 owners in the resort. And as many of y'all probably know, I'm new here, so we've had to be a very quick study on this. So I spent a lot of time. We have looked at other projects that the developer or the builder is doing. I've met with the owner several times. We've done reference checks on the owners. We've done reference checks on the builders. We have looked at quite a bit of stuff. We've spent some money internally on that. We've done a lot of research, not coming into today unknowing of what's going on here. We've really tried to study this. Earlier this week, I had meetings with the 3 property owner associations within Chatola. Meetings that lasted about 13 hours. It was literally my entire Tuesday. There were 3 successive meetings. We didn't just meet to talk about this. We talked about a lot of different things, but as you can imagine, this was a big topic of conversation during that. A lot of questions and different things. And I will admit that some of the things I'm going to talk through today are a little bit of surprise to me. Some of these things were at first kind of counterintuitive, but I'll try to go through all this as quickly as I can. This might go a little over, or quite a bit over 2 minutes, but I'll try to go through it. We looked at height, we looked at parking, we looked at total site plan, we looked at phase 1. We looked at aesthetic, landscaping, utilities, access, a lot of different things like that. This is below us, so we didn't really look at the water components to it, but our large dam does flow right down to there. And I personally saw what was going on in that creek during Helene at the height of where it was passing through us, which is a sight I hope never to see again. So several things that I'll go through in terms of where this is. I'm not saying that I'm speaking for all the community members in Chatola or all of the boards, but did try to gather a lot of feedback from that and try to synthesize this into this. In terms of the height, we are actually in favor of the height, both the 35-foot and the higher ones, and like the fact that this is going to have elevator. We do not have any elevators in any of our buildings, and that is a common complaint that people wish that was there. In terms of the parking, we are in favor of the fact that there is a little bit reduced parking. And why is that? There are a lot of parking spaces within Chatola that just sit empty. We would rather those be green spaces. We would rather that be prettier space than just empty spots that are sitting there. We have a ton of them. Even if you come in 4th of July. Even if you come in Symphony, we can't really use them because it's, those are designated, those are numbered spots. And even on Symphony, they sit empty. And I went around in golf cart and kind of looked this July, being relatively new here, to see that. The parking ratio, I do get it, but kind of where we see things, and we have probably a fairly direct, actually in favor of there being less parking in front of the building because of that. As I said, some of this is going to be a little counterintuitive, but that's where we are. The aesthetic, I'm probably the last person you're going to want to ask about that, but I will say my wife thinks it's pretty, and a lot of people who've seen this were in favor of that. We are pleased to hear that there will be some screening. This does come straight up against our property line, and we have been pleased with the fact that there has been a lot of transparency from the owner directly, and they have been very collaborative with us during Helene, during some different things. They offered us space for various things, et cetera. We have really appreciated that, and they have talked to us about taking what right now is a path that only a golf cart could fit through. And they've been talking about, hey, we would maybe they would maybe put a road in there, which would be basically a second entrance into Chatola. And to my surprise, the POAs are actually fairly intrigued by that idea. So I don't personally kind of have a concept around that yet, to be honest with you, but there has been some enthusiasm by that. And our security staff, some of which have been with us for many, many decades, have expressed enthusiasm for that in terms of some of the flow challenges we have around something like Symphony, where we have to shut down and do a one-way, but then I guess things have to go all the way back around the back of the hotel, and it's very challenging. So actually that release valve, maybe if it's only one time a year, that has been something that's been happy about. We have some dumpsters. We have 2 large dumpsters that are just to the south of this. They are basically here and here. And we have committed that we will look into actually some expenditure to beautify the space there, to honor what they're doing next door. Feedback we've gotten is that what is there right now is not what our residents would like to see there. It's not what we, as the hotel owner, would like to see there. Having something that is more vibrant, is more lively, is something that is a consistent thing that we've heard from our staff, from other members, et cetera. One of the biggest surprises that we found is that there is a very strong desire amongst the people in Chatola for there to be short-term rental. Why is that? I've asked, that frankly made very little sense to me. That would be in direct competition of what a program that we run, if y'all aren't very familiar. The reason being is that we have, I guess, pretty good sense of how frequently those buildings would be dark without that. And vibrancy is something that is, I think, valued by Chatola, by the people around us. So having that component to it actually is seen as a net positive, to be able to have, not just emptiness outside of, some prime months. It'd be nice to have people around in February, I guess, is the comment there. We've looked at, we have received things regarding golf carts and everything. We do have a shuttle van. I don't have a answer for you on that, but the owner has been pretty transparent in saying, hey, is there a way that there's a collaboration on that? We almost never use the shuttle van. I don't know what that looks like, but we'd be open to, we have expressed an openness to that. And in terms of utilities, we haven't studied that like with an engineer, but we have looked through it and been fairly, there's nothing that's really popped out at us on that front. And so, but we, our internal staff knows the utilities fairly well, and we've been okay with that. There's some challenges that we face with the current retail. I'll give you one kind of crazy one, when it gets cold at the beginning of the winter, we have mice and rats that come from the back of what's there and they climb up the hill into what's there. We have to do extra, stuff around that. There are a lot of things that we have to kind of interact with this neighbor of ours. I think overall, there has been a really strong positive feedback on the plan here. I think people are very excited that this is going to be something different than what it is currently. For background, I think this was one of Mr. Tanger's either original or second one, and he personally selected the owner, I found out, when he sold this. This was not a sale that he made lightly. This was really kind of to him a very personal thing in his portfolio. And the owner, I learned through backgrounds and checks and stuff, he lived in the Christian house at the college I went to and was housemates with a number of friends who were a couple of years older than me. They've all said wonderful things about his integrity, and he's been incredibly transparent to us. I kind of have some background on why he's not here today, and it's a fairly understandable reason. So overall, a fairly resounding positive on the site, on the smaller parking, on the short-term rental, on the height. Speaking for me personally, I would echo those things. We are in favor of this. My staff has expressed that same thing. I know I'm new here, but we tried to really do a lot of time and a lot of diligence on this. I've spent a lot of drive time looking at things and spent a lot of talks. I've also personally gone and spoken with a number of the shopkeepers in there. For instance, the toy store is a newer one. I've spoken with them all the way to some of the oldest tenants in there, and had those conversations. And so we are actually fairly resoundingly in favor of this project. So thank you.
I got a question for you if you want to answer again. I may have missed it, but from what I understand, you're thinking that short-term rentals would be more positive because it keeps the lights on and gives you and everybody else more activity. Is that what you said? I may have misunderstood.
Yes, so we do have some short-term rental in Chatola. It's, I don't know the ratio, but call it 85 out of 229, whatever that math is. And then there are another 32 homes that don't. So kind of add that on, but that's maybe it's a quarter, right? And there is there's a lot of darkness in about 6 months of the year, kind of parts of September, and then November on through into the spring. And so the short-term rental and the vibrancy that brings, that's seen as a positive amongst the. For us and amongst the residents around us. So kind of see that as a positive.
Now, the short term, you said 85 out of 200 and somewhat, I don't know how many. Some of those are privately owned and can do short term on their own anyway, can't they?
Yes, there's no restriction on short-term rental in those 229 condo units, and there's no monopoly or requirement that they hire any they can it's a free market, if you will. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, and several of them do rent outside of Chatola because of that. So there's a good mixture. Yeah. I think it's like
those
probably
condo
3 dozen.
units are all subject to short term, is what you're saying.
They all are compliant with short term.
With short term.
Yeah, and I believe they all operate with a 2-night minimum. There might be a difference there, and I can say for Chatola, we have on average one month-long rental a year across 85 things, and it's only for 1 month. And we were looking at that today. It's basically non-existent. And when we go to the owners with requests on that, which typically we get 2 to 3 a year, usually the owners reject those requests because the owners want to use this week here, they want to come up for the horse show here, they want to come up for 4th of July, they want to come up for Labor Day, and that just breaks up the ability to even offer a full contiguous 1 month stay. We have a timeshare business. Never buy a timeshare. I'll go on record on that. But those are one week's stays, and the delinquency on that is growing at a faster pace than people buy it. It's just not even just a week stay is just not something that there is appetite for. It's a very, very rare thing. For better or worse, that's just what, we're not going to be able to change the market. We don't fight that battle.
So Warren, you wouldn't see this as competition for Chitola if there was overnight stays in 80-90% of these units?
It's such a great question, and here's the irony to it, because we've studied that. I tasked one of our junior kind of whiz kids with really going into that. The short answer is I can't give you a definitive answer on that. The longer answer is, look at what John Winkler's proposing at Green Park Inn. There are 48 hotel rooms coming out of the market. You compare that with Embers bringing on 36, Sunset bringing on 18. Go back several years and go forward several years. And I don't know, pick a number. Go back 5 years, go forward 5 years. Over that decade, we're seeing a net growth of 6 hotel rooms in this market. Ironically, whether this is for everyone or not, more hotel rooms is a vibrant thing that is helpful. So we kind of look at different things. There's a supply demand imbalance. If it gets too much to an extreme, it's not helpful. So I don't have perfect science around that, but yes, it's a net positive from what our studies have shown on that. Again, I will freely admit several of these things are counterintuitive. We looked at a lot of this stuff, but yes, we actually would like short-term rental to be there. We would like for this to change over. We would like for there to be less parking. We like the height that's been proposed. The ability to have elevators there is a good thing. So, but I've spent quite a bit of money on this in time, and we did kind of beat this up a bit. So this is a pretty, as you can imagine, this is a pretty impactful thing to not just the resort, but also the timeshare business, which we manage, the vacation rental component, the portion of which we manage. It's just a lot of different things. So, yeah. Thank you all.
Thank you. All right, discussion time.
So, in terms of discussion, the
Conditions?
yeah, well, I mean, start with that as the discussion. I mean, Kevin's presented us with a couple of options. My discussion, from my standpoint, is I think they're great. The sidewalk, I had not appreciated that it wasn't a part of phase one. I had seen it on the conceptual plan. I think it's, personally, I think it's an important infrastructure piece to add with phase one. I'm glad the applicants feel that they're good with that condition. I think that's good. And then the first longer condition that has been drafted for us, I think is great. I mean, everybody wants this place to, be great, be vibrant, not be underutilized like it is right now. But if it is only phase one, this at least gives us that, gives the town this improvement that aesthetically we could use. And the third thing I'd say about conditions, I had read this out before, and I don't know how any of y'all feel about it, but I would feel more comfortable with the parking reduction if we could just append to that the provision that if phase two comes back, that we look at the town is able to look at the parking situation as a whole and not just not be able to carve out this phase one away from that. So it's just, you know, when the future comes and the town is protected in that sense that it can, you know, staff and whoever the planning board and town council are at that time can look at the whole big picture, and the applicant acknowledges that.
Okay. Any other comments?
I jotted down what you're sharing there, unless you've got something more
Yeah, I've written it
detailed.
down, and if I'd like to make a motion with that, and when the time comes, I will make a motion with that, but I will hand it to Taylor as well, so she has the
Okay.
language.
All right.
Right now, we appear to have, and I'm going to, tell me if I'm wrong, do we have a consensus on the two staff comments, or the two staff conditions and the two applicant conditions with the modifications to the parking? So we've got 4 conditions that we have consensus on. Now, Steve mentioned another.
I mentioned short-term rentals. I also mentioned, and I don't know if we can do this, a condition to ensure that there's always a retail component to the larger project as a condition to approving this residential development. Since we're not approving a mixed-use
Yeah.
development now.
It might be more appropriate to add that as a condition in the next phase, to get into the details of how much retail space is going to be made available. We don't know that, they don't know that, and they have an idea. It may be that one would be reserved for the next time you come back. One thing as Chris was mentioning, we want a comprehensive allocation of parking, and to understand that with Phase 1A, all of it together, what is your number going to be? And then the other one, if coming back, would be to address your concern about the amount of retail remaining, this, or whatever it might be. I think it'd be more appropriate for the next phase.
That's a good response.
But in that response, Kevin, the question is if in 24 months they say we're not going to do the other project with retail, which they would come back and we would be addressing retail at that point. By making this the condition that we're making it, they can change the retail they got right now into non-retail, couldn't they?
Not without coming back to
No.
us, no.
Well,
Not without coming back. I mean,
so in the modifications we're asking them to make, if they do not go with Phase 2, they are going to modify the paint, color,
Yes.
upgrade, but it has to stay retail as it is right now. Even though the whole property's being reconditioned.
Yes.
Not just the Phase 1.
today, they have the opportunity to change out all the retail components.
Into residential?
No,
No.
no.
That's what
to-
he's asking is.
That's what I'm
Yeah,
asking.
not to residential, no. It's got to be retail or a restaurant or something
Right.
that's came out
If
of.
we pass this condition that we're doing now, they would be able to make it residential,
No,
No, not without
No,
coming
sir.
back.
not without coming back. Okay.
right, not without coming back.
And this is
That
being
part's going to
videoed.
remain. I don't think you have to add a condition to ensure that it is, because it has to by the underlying zoning district that it's in.
Okay. All right.
Really, all they're
That's my
asking
question. I
for-
just wanted to make sure we had the opportunity to keep retail in there as we go forward. Whether they build it up and put retail in it, or they don't do any more and just upgrade the existing retail. Don't care who's in there, because that's what they
right.
gotta rent. But,
There's no authorization that is allowed to them other than this retail component for Phase 1. The rest of it's going to remain operational as it is. Might be a new shop in any of those.
Yeah.
But to change the rest of it outside of Phase 1, they got to come back.
go to, okay. Thank you.
Back on the short-term rental situation, I'd like to get the sense from the rest of the board. Would you entertain a condition to restrict to some extent short-term rental? And you could define short-term rental as a minimum of 30 days. I mean, I don't have a problem with short-term rentals, seasonal rentals, or even a month rental, but I'd hate for this to be a condominium that's actually functioning as another hotel. you know, there will be opportunities for additional residential in the mixed-use development in the next phase, and maybe that's more appropriate to have overnight stays, but I'm having a problem with short-term rentals if it's not limited to some amount of time. What's the board think? I don't feel strongly
Even
about it.
based on the comments that you just heard
Well,
from the neighbor, the
well,
biggest neighbor?
Yep. I was surprised to hear that answer, but,
I'm not, I mean, it's a commercial zone. My view would be that this is an appropriate place for short-term rental, both in the sense of it's a commercial zoning today, as well as the fact that their neighbor, even if no one from Chatola had shown up and spoken, their neighbor has short-term rental. And I think about where many of the conflicts come with short-term rental is when it's mixed in with single family, it's mixed in with places, you know, properties around it that don't have short-term rental, and there can be a conflict of, you know, use of noise, whatever it might be. To me, this seems like a great location for short-term rental in concept. And then secondly, I don't think that 34 more units or more of short-term rental in this location is going to be harmful for the town. I think it's I'm just explaining where I am. So
no, and I do want to respond just to what you said. I wasn't thinking of this from the town standpoint. I was thinking of this from condominium owners who buy into this project and you know, for full-time use.
Sure.
And they've got people on both sides of them that are overnight stays.
Gotcha.
So is it a condominium or is it? Because if you allow short-term rental, I do own a unit in Royal Oak, which is one of the other places that allows short-term rental. And I think out of 50 some odd units in there, I believe only 6 are owner occupied full-time. And the rest are overnight stays, week stays, weekend stays, and it's a disruption for the owner occupants.
I think that's a great point. And I think sales for sure would have to have full disclosure of this is what you're buying. And your neighbors up, down, next door could all be doing this, right? I mean, I agree with that, but if
The
people
other
buy
side
into it-
is that from the developer's representative and from developing some myself, I know that short-term rentals are better because otherwise I don't get my money out of it.
Right.
You know, and you get less activity and you get more people walking away. I've walked away from, when they say 30 days, I've walked away from several condos that say 30 days because I can't find anybody in my family that wants to rent for 30 days or anybody in the country anymore that wants to spend 30 days anywhere, you know, so.
Do a quick show of hands on that one. Anybody?
I don't support any restriction on short-term rental.
I'll defer to the board on this one.
Yeah, I tend to think it's in the commercial district and it's allowed in the commercial district, short-term rental, as would Mr. Winkler's project at Green Park. And as a homeowner, I would make a decision, if this was gonna be a secondary residence for me or a primary residence and it did short-term rental, I probably wouldn't buy it because I wouldn't wanna live in that. But if I'm a family coming to Blowing Rock for July 4th weekend, that's what I'm looking for.
Right.
And so it's different uses. And I think that's where my mind is.
Great.
So we're back to the 4 conditions.
Is that a motion?
Are we ready to entertain a motion?
We'll entertain a motion.
I'd like to make a motion to recommend approval of the project with first of all, the 2 conditions that have been handed out to us, read by Kevin earlier this evening. They're labeled staff conditions for consideration. I'd like to have those be 2 conditions. The condition that the maximum building height of 5 mezzanines be no more than 53 feet measured from the primary entrance. And then the 4th condition of reduced parking, again, that Kevin read out earlier, of 1 space for 1 bedroom, 2 for 2 or more bedrooms, and the additional 1 per floor. Adding the provision provided that any future phases of redevelopment will need to address the parking supply and demand of the entire development, including phase one.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Any opposed? Tom? All right, thank you. Is there any old business, Kevin?
No, sir.
Update? None?
Not this time. No, sir.
Thank you, everyone, for coming tonight, and we'll adjourn the meeting.